friends, happy 5th Sunday of Lent 2022. What a beautiful gospel story that we just heard from the Gospel of John. And of course, it is a story of an encounter between Jesus, the crowd, and the woman who, according to the gospel, was caught publicly committing adultery. So, what does the church wants us to reflect in this gospel, which is a very powerful and beautiful gospel? I think on two levels. The church wants us to enter into the story for this to be really meaningful. Meaning, what does it mean to enter? Is to be part of the scene, in a sense, to transport ourselves as though in a time machine and be part of this. So on one level, we are invited to be part of the crowd. So what does it mean to be part of the crowd? So if I'm going to ask you, if we ask ourselves, if you were one of the crowd, how would you have said something? How would you have participated into the conversation? Would you be like the crowd? Like the crowd was so determined to implement the law in a very legalistic society, in a very legalistic religion, as the gospel reminds us. They were so determined to impose or to implement the law in front of the woman's offense. So they asked Jesus to favor their determination. Jesus, if you are obedient to the law of Moses, this woman deserves punishment for what she did. So they were determined by the law. Now, would you be that person? I guess some of us may be quite familiar with that, because sometimes we can easily be guided or dictated by law. This is the reason why we judge quite easily sometimes, because we have in our minds and our hearts, we have this standard of human behavior. We have this, again, the Ten Commandments and other sets of laws that guide us in our everyday lives. And this crowd was so determined to judge the woman according to the law. Would you be this person? Would you be this person who would easily implement and punish this woman for what she did? And that's the first level. The second level is that this gospel also invites us to be like that woman, or to be that woman. What would you feel? How would you experience if you were that woman? In 2016, at the conclusion of the year, the Jubilee of Mercy, Pope Francis wrote an apostolic letter entitled Misericordia et Misera, which means mercy and the woman who is suffering, the woman who is condemned by the law. So misera. So Pope Francis was trying to say is that woman actually is us. That woman who is now suffering, who is condemned by society, who is condemned by the law, is all of us. Because of our sins, you and I, all of us are sinners. And many times we feel being judged by the law right away. Many of us, because of our sins, we tend to distance ourselves from the church because we feel that, my sins seems to be going in circles. Why am I committing the same sins again? So deep inside our hearts, we feel that, my God, I am judged already. I am judged. Now, this woman exactly experienced the same thing. Now, again, we are in the season of Lent, which is a season of mercy and a season of healing. This season of mercy is basically an encounter between Jesus, the merciful, who loves us unconditionally, and misera, meaning you and I, who are suffering because of our sins. The world, as you know, is full of sins. We hear every day flashed on our TV screens the sins of humanity that caused this destruction and people fleeing and displaced from their places and deaths, so many deaths around the world. It is because an external manifestation of what sin can do to us and to the world. So, dear friends, again, with this beautiful and powerful gospel, we cannot help but be sucked into the story and find this gospel meaningful in our lives to help us to truly appreciate that this is about an encounter between Jesus, who is mercy, and I myself. Unless we see this in this way, through the help of this gospel, I'm afraid that this Lent may not be that meaningful. Because this Lent is about mercy. This Lent is about God's unconditional love. So it behooves, it invites us to really to humble ourselves and acknowledge our sinfulness. And then we can ask the Lord, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. I have done this or I have not done this. We have this sense of omission or commission. Many times we can easily identify the sins that we committed, and sometimes we are not very quick to remember that there are things that we also ought to have done, but we did not do. And there are times too that we forget that how our sins are impacting others, impacting relationships, because our sins are not just a violation of the rules, the standards. Yes, that's one side of our sins. But the other side of our sins is that how it affects or hurts relationship, how it affects me, how it left a dent in my life, in my dignity. And secondly, how it hurts others. In my judgment, in my impatience, how am I hurting others? Or how am I putting others down or demeaning the dignity of others? And ultimately, our sins are ultimately about our relationship with God, who is the source of all our relationship. So today, dear friends, again, let us be reminded of God's mercy, because what dictates at the end of the story, who has the final word? This has the final word. Mercy has the final word, that your story and my story, your journey and my journey are destined towards. So this is the last word, which is merciful, unconditional love of God.